In this video, I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've been working on, not as a content creator, but as a fellow cybersecurity professional in the field. Because I think on YouTube in general, there's a lot of people that, they used to do the thing and now they make content on it and they no longer do the thing, they just talk about it. And so since I am very active in actually doing cybersecurity, I wanted to share with you guys some of the things that I've been working on because I think there's motivation in that. If you didn't know, when I first started Elevate Cyber, the YouTube channel, I started out as a content creator that was just vlogging about my experience as I was pursuing the OSCP. This was back in 2018. And so just as a lot of people expressed they got value out of that, I hope to give you guys some value and some insights and some motivation, if nothing else, that will help fuel you, keep you going, especially in some of these tough times here in the tech industry in general. So what I'm working on, what I'm focused on now is very different than what I was focused on several years ago. When I started the channel, when I was getting into the field, I guess by the time I started the channel, I'd already been in the field for, a few years at that point. But anyhow, what I'm working on now is very different. And so don't think that, okay, I'm working on this, so therefore you have to as well. It's nothing like that. There's so many different paths in cybersecurity. It's more so to share it with you guys. So the main focus, what I've been working on recently, is I'm going through a bit of a transitional period in terms of my focus. And so when I first started out in cybersecurity, I started as a pen tester. And then eventually I moved into a red teaming position where I was still doing some pen testing, but I was involved on a lot of red team and occasional purple teaming engagements as well, especially as the company found out that, hey, these red team engagements are unfair. Those are the terms they use, unfair to the blue team, because we're beating up on them so bad that they're not even getting value out of it. We need to be doing more purple teaming. So I end up jumping over to that side as well as doing red teaming and purple teaming, as well as some pen tests as well. But now one of the things I've been doing after leaving the 9-to-5, corporate life, is I have been doing freelance contracts in pen testing for various companies, leveraging my credentials and the position that I'm in to get these contracts and things like that as a way to keep myself, immersed in the space and things like that. And so there's a few companies in Thailand that I'm working with, and I do have my work authorization here in Thailand, so I can legally work here and everything like that. But I am working as an independent contractor, basically picking up these under my company. And so that was what I had been doing for the last year. Now I'm in a bit of a transitioning phase here where I'm moving into considering, I'm not going to say 100% that this is what I'm going to do just yet, but it's looking like I'm going to be transitioning into the vulnerability research side of things because I find myself just really gravitating towards that area. And so VR is a path that I've been wanting to go down for quite some time. So one of the things that I'm doing right now on the side is I'm ramping myself up to do vulnerability research, look for memory corruption bugs and things like that, exploit development, basically weaponizing the vulnerabilities, which if you guys do exploit development and stuff, that is the hardest part, right? Because in comparison, identifying the vulnerability is the easy part, but actually being able to weaponize it, if it's even possible, because there's many vulnerabilities out there in plain sight that due to mitigations, due to configuration constraints or whatever, it might not be exploitable, or it might take a lot of time in order to weaponize something. Not all of these bugs are weaponizable. So, if that's even a word. So that's one of the things that I'm looking into. I'm building up my chops more in that area because I'm not quite there yet in terms of my skill level in order to do that as like a major, let's say like a major part of Elevate Cyber. And, just full transparency for you guys. This stuff is really hard. Even as someone with over a decade of experience in cybersecurity, this stuff is really hard. I will say that for sure. You can ask anyone that does it for real. Exploit development is no joke, especially if you're doing both VR and exploit dev, which are different skill sets, but they're closely intertwined. So I am basically beefing up my chops to target, I want to really focus in and target a specific piece of technology. So specifically, I'm looking at a certain area of the Windows OS, let's say. So there's a lot of ramp up that needs to happen for that. While I have touched on all the basics of exploit development and vuln research and stuff like that, I would say I'm probably at around an intermediate stage. So I definitely am focused on upskilling myself in those areas. One of the things that I'm doing specifically right now is I am trying to better understand the heap. Now, I need to make the transition of understanding the Windows heap. Now, one of the challenges of understanding the heap in Windows is not only that it's, constantly changing with new versions of Windows and things like that, but also that it is, closed source, and the information on it is pretty difficult to find publicly. There's not a lot publicly available. And so a lot of it is, and a lot of the researchers, they tend to guard the information, hold it pretty close to the chest, because there's a lot of money to be made in understanding this stuff. You can sell Windows exploits, then there's a good market for that, right? So it is a challenge, and of course Windows is closed sourced as well compared to Linux, which is open source. So yeah, it makes it that much more difficult. So I am first beefing myself up on Windows Heap, even though they are different implementations, with PT-Malloc 2, which I'm focused on right now on the Linux side. Of course, Windows has its own heap implementation, and actually multiple at that, with the low fragmentation heap and all that stuff. I won't get into that, bog you down with those details. But a lot of the concepts of, like, let's say heap grooming and heap metadata corruption and that kind of stuff, that still applies, like singly linked list, doubly linked list, the front end allocator, the back end allocator, all of that still applies. So there's a lot of fundamentals that you can learn that apply cross operating system. So I'm starting off with Linux, and right now I'm working through the House of series. If you're familiar with, like, the House of Force, House of Orange, those types of challenges on the Linux side to really beef up my heap exploitation skills and things like that. And you saw me release some videos on the channel, like abusing UAF bugs and things like that. And, if there is interest in me breaking down any of the heap exploitation stuff on the Linux side, maybe walking through some of those challenges on the channel, let me know in the comments section below. I'd be happy to make videos on that. But that's the real focus right now. I'm also getting more exploitation practice on the Windows side. I'm working through OSED from Offensive Security. I don't plan on taking the exam for that or anything, but with my previous employer, I had access to Learn Unlimited. So one of the things that I did before I left my previous employer was I took advantage of the fact that OffSec allows you to download the PDFs. So I downloaded the PDF for all of the OSCE3 courses, including OSED. And so since I have that PDF, the nice thing about binary exploitation is you can get those binaries. They're just, they're publicly available, the ones that they practice on in the PDF. So I just went and downloaded those vulnerable binaries, and I'm following along with the PDF, getting some good practice on Windows exploitation. Unfortunately for that course, it's limited to 32-bit user mode. But yeah, that's one of the things that I have been doing as well, just to really beef up on the Windows side, get more practice with WinDebug, which is going to be my bread and butter, obviously doing exploit dev on the Windows side of the house. I'm feeling pretty good about that, but there are definitely some techniques towards the tail end of that PDF guide that are new to me that would really benefit me. So I'm kind of skimming through it a little bit, going through some of the exercises and just shoring up the holes in my foundations there. The next big thing that I need to get into before I'm really going to turn myself loose on really hunting these bugs and trying to weaponize them is learning more on the Windows kernel side. So one of the things that I plan to do for that is, and I'm going to focus on one thing at a time, so I'm going to really focus on the heap first, but in the horizon I'm looking at doing things like HEVD, the vulnerable driver, trying to exploit the vulnerable driver that's offered out there by Hacksys on GitHub. And then also looking into developing my own drivers for educational purposes. I know there was like a course that I had bought a while back that I haven't worked through by Rostamaus on offensive driver development and things like that. So that's one that I definitely plan on going through, taking good notes on as well. And obviously setting up a Windows virtual machine that I am able to debug, because if you didn't know, a huge part of kernel exploitation is you're going to get a lot of blue screens of deaths, because when you crash in the kernel, you crash the entire OS. So you want to have a debugging environment set up in a virtual machine so that your debugger is outside of the VM, so that when you crash the VM, you can just restart it and it doesn't crash your whole system and things like that. And you still have access to the state of the registers and all of that at the time of the crash, because your debugger is outside of that virtual machine. So I have set that up before, but just refreshing myself on how to set that up, start looking at things in the kernel, and then once I get comfortable with that, I'm going to start slowly turning on the various mitigations and seeing how they work by maybe reverse engineering them, taking notes, maybe something I can create content off of, and then also looking into any kind of bypasses that might exist out there for the various mitigations, including looking at some of those mitigations that exist but are not turned on by default. Because if you didn't know, there's a ton of those in Windows where things like shadow stacks and things like that, where they exist, the option is available, but Windows just hasn't turned it on by default yet. One day they're going to do that. The reason primarily that they don't is that it might break a lot of things in their customers' environments. Remember, they have a lot of companies using their products and things like that, and so they don't want to just turn everything on and then everything breaks. But one day eventually they will be turned on by default. So it's good to get a leg up and learn about it, even if you're not knowing how to bypass it just yet, because some of that research hasn't been discovered yet, or it's still in the works. At least understanding how that works a little bit better is going to give you a big leg up. And obviously, if you can weaponize something and say, hey, it bypasses these advanced mitigations, well, then that's even more valuable for your exploit chain as well. So those are some of the things that I'm looking at, ways that I'm beefing myself up, and as I'm kind of transitioning into this area, I'm also looking at more code review and stuff like that, because as a pen tester, most of the stuff that I did on the job was black box. Now, I have a lot of experience with development and stuff through red teaming and through my own personal interest. And even when I first started as a pen tester, I was doing some static code assessments, mostly on higher level languages, like Java and C# and things like that. So it's not completely foreign to me. However, this is a new domain of looking through C code and C++ code, looking for memory corruption vulnerabilities and things like that. One of the things I did recently is I went on GitHub and I looked at network packet parsers, and I went to the last page on the GitHub and I found just some random project someone created for a network parser, and I git cloned it on my machine and started doing source code analysis, doing static source analysis. I challenged myself to identify vulnerabilities without using a fuzzer or anything like that. And through my source analysis, I identified a number of vulnerabilities. And if there's interest in that, I can make a video on that process as well. It's actually pretty easy. There's a lot of very vulnerable software out there. Obviously the big software by Microsoft and all that stuff is going to be like pretty secure compared to the vast majority, like 90% of the software out there is like not secure at all. And I found a number of vulnerabilities. There was off by one vulnerability. There was also a lack of bounds checking that leads to a potential stack buffer overflow. That's something that I am looking at exploiting right now, actually at the moment, because theoretically it should be possible. I just haven't had the time to go and try it yet. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to be verifying as well. And it was a really interesting process, and I would like to share it on the channel. If there's an interest, just let me know. But these are some of the things that I've been working on. What have you been working on? Let's make this an interesting discussion here. Let me know down in the comments section below. Remember, there is no right or wrong answer to this. We're just kind of sharing our work and things like that, and hopefully this was motivational to you. Do you even like this format? Is this something that I should continue doing, kind of experimenting with some different formats? This was one of the original formats of the channel, and I haven't updated you guys in a pretty long time as far as what I've been working on the security side. So yeah, I'm still out there. I'm still doing the work and doing all that stuff. What am I going to do with these freelance contracts? Well, honestly, I'm going to be giving them out to my students that are part of my YearPass program as a way for them to gain experience. We'll kind of offload some of the work that I'm doing so I can focus more on the vuln research side, and we'll see where I go down the line with the VR thing, if I make that my full thing or not in terms of my cybersecurity involvements. But yeah, hopefully this was a good video, not just me rambling at you. But I'll see you guys in the next video.